Hello?
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello?
Is this Mrs. Dorothy Letterman?
That's right, Dorothy.
Yes, it is. Who's this?
Are you the mother of David Letterman who does Late Night on NBC?
She was never invited back, not for a cameo or a tribute, and not even after the ratings dipped and the applause moved on. One moment, she was Carson's golden girl, and the next she was invisible. No explanation, just a silent, brutal exile. She was never allowed back on the Johnny Carson Show after this, and she wasn't alone. A handful of stars also ended up on the wrong side of Johnny Carson's smile. And when Johnny turned cold, Hollywood turned its back. What kind of late-night king builds an empire on charm and fear? We're about to find out. There was a time in Hollywood when one show held the keys to everything. If you wanted to be seen, this was the place. You wanted to be taken seriously, you only had to get that 5-minute slot. And if you crushed it, life changed overnight. But there was a catch. That spotlight came with rules that no one dared to reveal out loud. But everyone understood. And worst of all, you never had to get on the bad side of Hollywood dominators because once you did, you were out. Some of the biggest names in the industry found themselves suddenly locked out. Not because they weren't talented or the audience didn't love them, but because Johnny Carson decided they didn't belong anymore. And once Johnny turned his back on you, so did the rest of the industry. The thing is, most people watching at home never saw any of this. They just tuned in for a laugh, but behind the jokes and applause was a quiet tension. One wrong move, one misread moment, and it was over. Sometimes, it was something simple. If a guest went too far with a joke or didn't let Johnny get the last word, it had become a problem. Other times, it was deeper, stemming from loyalty issues and business decisions that felt like betrayal. And then there were the personal feuds that started off camera and ended in total silence. What made it even more intense was how subtle it all was. Nobody got called out publicly. There weren't big, dramatic fights or messy headlines. People just stopped showing up. And if you asked around, you got a shrug. Or a quiet, you know how it is. But for those on the other side of that silence, it was devastating. Years of work could vanish with one missed invitation. Being banned from Carson wasn't just bad for your ego. It could cost you your career. That's the part of the story most people never hear. The real story lived behind the curtain, in the names that never got mentioned again and the guest chairs that stayed empty. So what made The Tonight Show so powerful? What gave it that kind of control over lives, reputations, and futures? To answer that, we have to look closer at the show itself. The Tonight Show era, it's hard to explain just how big The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson really was unless you lived through it. This wasn't just a late-night talk show. It was the place to be, especially if you were a rising star, a nervous stand-up comedian, or a Hollywood heavyweight with a new film to plug. In fact, if you landed a spot on The Tonight Show, you were made. And it was as simple as that. Johnny had this way of making everything feel effortless. His sly grin, the way he let a punchline sit for just half a second longer than you expected. He had timing that couldn't be taught. And don't even get started on Karnak the Magnificent. Dressed like a dollar store fortune teller, holding sealed envelopes to his head, and delivering the kind of jokes that somehow got funnier because they were so ridiculous. It was goofy and weird, but it was also iconic. But where the real power came in was how he could easily launch a career with one nod, one laugh, and one simple wave to invite a guest over to the interview chair after their set. That Carson wave was the holy grail. Guys like David Letterman or Jerry Seinfeld could testify to what that moment meant. And if you asked, they'll tell you it changed everything. And millions of people tuned in every single night. This was before streaming, before you could watch clips on your phone while half listening to a podcast. You watched Johnny when he was on, or you missed it, and trust me, no one wanted to miss it. What did it for everyone were his monologue, sketches, guests, and musical act that has been copied over the years ever since. Jimmy Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel, who were also talk show hosts, used it, and even Stephen Colbert, who is the host for The Late Night Show with Stephen Colbert, is also using it right now. Carson didn't just host a show, he invented the blueprint for late-night television as we know it. He effortlessly ran that empire for 3 decades, and for most of it, he was untouchable. But when the cameras stopped rolling and the applause faded out, a different version of Johnny came out. Behind the charm and the jokes, things weren't nearly as smooth. In fact, sometimes they got downright ugly. See, as much as Carson's influence went, it had its downsides, and if you got on his wrong side, there would be repercussions. You wouldn't just be cut from the show, you were cut from the entire conversation. Even though Johnny's approval could make you a star, losing that approval could flat out ruin you. This wasn't just about bruised egos or missing out on a single TV appearance. Getting banned from The Tonight Show back then was like being erased from the industry's memory. Bookers would stop calling, studio executives would get cold feet, and other shows kept their distance, afraid of stepping on Johnny's toes. He didn't have to say a word publicly. His silence was loud enough. Everyone just knew if Carson was done with you, you were done. It was even more brutal because he didn't have to publicly declare it. All he had to do was just talk about his day, and the person on the wrong side of his MIC would stop getting booked, and it never goes unnoticed by everyone in the industry. Some comedians tried to brush it off. Others, like Rich Little, learned the hard way. Rich Little was a legendary impressionist that got the boot for making fun of Johnny too many times, even though the official line was that his material had just gone stale. Another comedian was Dana Carvey, who did a spot-on Carson impression while promoting Wayne's World. Carson didn't find it funny, and he didn't say anything about it, but he banned Carvey, just like that. And the scariest part was that there was never a clear line or rulebook to know where the edge was, until you fell off it. So, who dared to challenge Johnny? And who paid the price? The Joan Rivers fallout. If there was anyone Johnny Carson took under his wing, it was Joan Rivers. Back in the 1960s, she was a fresh, no-nonsense comedian with a sharp wit and a fire in her belly that drew Johnny to her. He brought her on The Tonight Show when female comedians weren't exactly the norm, and he made her a regular. More than that, he gave her a shot at national stardom, especially after she was turned down severely for being washed up at just 31 years of age. Joan had been grinding in the clubs, hustling for sets, barely scraping by when Carson brought her onto The Tonight Show. And when she slayed that first set, he turned to the camera, grinned, and told America, "You're gonna be hearing a lot about this girl." That one line changed everything. Overnight, Rivers went from nothing to being hired as a writer for The Tonight Show, thanks to Carson. He not only gave her the chance to bloom, he also minted, championed, and even brought her in as his permanent guest host when he took nights off. To the outside world, it looked like a dream duo, the king of late night and his trusted queen-in-waiting. But behind all the laughs and applause, a storm was brewing. In 1986, Joan got an offer from Fox to launch her own late-night show. It was groundbreaking news, as Fox was a brand-new network, and this was a chance for her to be the first woman to host a major late-night talk show. She didn't take the decision lightly. According to interviews, Joan was terrified. She didn't want to hurt Johnny, but she also saw that NBC had no plans to give her The Tonight Show when Carson eventually stepped down. And worst of all, she found out from NBC executives that she wasn't even being considered, so she took the Fox deal. But the part that changed everything was that she didn't let Johnny know first. Carson found out through the grapevine and not from Joan. He was furious, and it wasn't the kind of rage you yell about and then get over. Carson was silent, cold, and full of calculated fury. He hung up on her when she called and refused to speak to her ever again. He didn't return her letters and didn't acknowledge her efforts to reach out for years. From that moment on, she was out. Not just off The Tonight Show, she was banned and blacklisted. Worst of all, anyone who dared appear on her Fox show wasn't welcome on Johnny's couch either. Insiders who worked on the show said Carson felt blindsided. To him, it wasn't about the fact that she left for just a news show. He was more about loyalty. He thought she'd gone behind his back, and in Carson's world, that kind of betrayal wasn't forgivable. She was like a daughter to him, one former staffer recalled. But once you broke that trust with Johnny, you were done. Joan, on her end, was heartbroken. In interviews years later, her voice still cracked when she talked about Johnny. She called him the single most important figure in her career. She said she wrote him a letter every year, hoping and praying for a response, but nothing ever came back. Not even a word. And it didn't stop with silence. Carson made sure her name was erased from The Tonight Show history. For decades, clips of her appearances were buried. Her name wasn't mentioned, and she became the show's invisible woman. She later wrote about why she felt Carson was mad about her leaving, saying, "I think he really felt because I was a woman that I just was his, that I wouldn't leave him." I know this sounds very warped, but I don't understand otherwise what was going on. When Carson passed away in 2005, Joan admitted she cried not because the world had lost a very important figure, but because she had lost her mentor and the first ever man to believe in her. She was even more hurt that he passed away without them being able to reconcile their differences. She once said in an interview, "I would have done anything to make it right. I just wanted to talk, but he wouldn't even look at me." And Joan wasn't the only one. Some faced Carson's wrath live on air. Live on air, not everyone got banned from The Tonight Show because they were rude or disrespectful. Some just didn't know when to stop. Some thought they could poke the bear and walk away. But with Johnny Carson, once you crossed a certain line, even if you didn't mean to, you were done. Take Bobcat Goldthwait, for example. The guy was wild and had this loud, unpredictable energy that either made you laugh or made you nervous. One night, he took it too far. During a guest appearance, Bobcat actually lit the chair on fire on purpose and on live television. That was his idea of a stunt, but that didn't sit well with everyone as it was a joke gone bad. Even though Jay Leno was the host at the time, some people thought that Carson wouldn't have been impressed. The network was furious, and Bobcat was banned from the show. Not just that, he was arrested and convicted of arson and was fined for $2,700, plus the cost of the chair, which was around $700. He was also sentenced to make public service announcements for fire safety. He never stepped foot on that stage again. That one moment ended his chances with late night for good. Then there's Kathy Griffin. Now, Kathy's whole brand is being bold and loud and unapologetic. She talks about the things most people avoid, and she doesn't really care who gets offended. That attitude didn't sit well with a lot of late-night hosts, especially Jay Leno, who followed Carson. Kathy's edgy humor was seen as too much, and not just once. As time went by, she found herself banned from multiple shows, including The Tonight Show. Carson may not have banned her personally, but she definitely fit the mold of someone who wouldn't have made it past his standards either. One too many off-color jokes, and the doors quietly closed. But then there's Melanie Chartoff, who didn't blow up anything. She didn't curse on air or insult anyone in front of a camera. All she did was make jokes that weren't even a big deal. She usually said things that made other crew members laugh, and even Johnny himself laughed at the jokes. She was amongst a few people who got along well with Carson, and so she didn't have any issues with him. She even appeared as a guest on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, including an unforgettable episode alongside George Burns and Richard Dawson in 1982. That's the thing about Carson. He could make or break a career, sure, but if you weren't careful, he could also slay it. Even if you didn't mean to step on his toes, even if it was just a joke whispered behind the scenes, if he took it the wrong way, you were out. However, not every ban from The Tonight Show came from some act of defiance or rebellion. Some were just misunderstandings, honest mistakes, a joke misread, or a move that wasn't cleared. And suddenly, one move could place you on Johnny's bad side. Howie Mandel found that out the hard way. Johnny Carson was still early in his career, still figuring things out, trying to be memorable. So one night, he brought a giant stuffed tiger on stage. A prop, not cleared with producers, not part of the plan. It was supposed to be funny, silly, just something to get a laugh. One thing Johnny hated was surprises, especially ones that mess with the rhythm of the show. So after that night, Howie was never invited back. No formal ban, no angry letter, just silence. Cold, brutal silence. Then there was Lola Falana, who was talented and magnetic. She lit up the stage every time she walked into a room. But during one appearance, she spoke openly about racism in the industry. She talked about what it was like being a black woman in showbiz during a time when most people were too scared to even bring that stuff up. She was honest and bold, but Johnny wasn't ready for that kind of conversation on late-night TV. And just like that, Lola was gone. She didn't get another invite. America still wasn't ready to hear the truth in that setting. And Carson, as powerful as he was, wasn't willing to rock the boat. Artie Langer wasn't left out. His story takes a different turn. He didn't get banned by Carson. He got banned by Conan O'Brien years later. Artie was in the middle of a battle with addiction. He was unpredictable, hard to manage. So Conan's team cut ties. At the time, it felt like a punch to the gut. But looking back, Artie says it saved him. It forced him to hit pause to get help. And when he finally got sober, he actually thanked Conan. He said being banned was the beginning of his comeback. Sometimes a ban meant your career was over. Other times, it was just the world's roughest wake-up call. While Johnny Carson silently did his thing, there was one time he actually did say something, and this time they were loud.